Hey there, music lovers. Thank you so much for clicking on my channel and welcome to the third episode of a series called Artists That Deserve More Love. This is where we take some time to appreciate those bands and musicians that just do not get the amount of attention and respect that they should be getting. And these can be musicians or bands that have had decades-long careers but for whatever reason just did not get the same respect and recognition that their peers got. These can be bands that are really specific to a certain niche. They can be up-and-coming artists, or they can be musicians with just 20 followers on Spotify. Whatever the case may be, these are just musicians that I feel should get more attention. They don't get the love they deserve, and you're missing out by not knowing who they are. So with all that being said, let's just go straight into it and get started. The first artist in this episode that deserves more love is a progressive rock band from New Jersey called Thank You Scientist. They're a band that really does not sound like anyone else out there, so I'll do my best to try to give you an idea of what their music sounds like. Now, I called Thank You Scientist a progressive rock band, although I don't know if that description really does them the full justice they deserve. Imagine a jazz fusion band with a guitar player that loves heavy metal and a singer that was really inspired by doo-wop and R&B, but they also have a violin section and a horn section. That's Thank You Scientist. I mean, they really are one of the most unique sounding bands I've heard in recent years. Their level of originality is up there with like maybe a System of a Down, where just no other band sounds like them. And on top of that, they're also really great songwriters who know how to blend their more progressive influences with a pop-oriented mindset. There's a lot of bands and musicians out there that just want to be abstract and progressive and push the boundaries of what music can be, and they do not care at all about appealing to a mainstream audience. Thank You Scientist is not that. They still have a lot of eccentricities and oddness to them, something that if you just listen to pop rock and pop metal, you might not be used to hearing, but they still are very focused on what can appeal to a larger audience. Their songs are just really well constructed, very catchy, and really fun to listen to. And if you're not really into progressive rock or you haven't gone deep into jazz fusion, I think Thank You Scientist is a really great band to start with, to kind of be the gateway drug that takes you down into the more experimental and out there forms of music. So if you're trying to get into Thank You Scientist, they've only have 3 albums out at the time of recording this video. So with that in mind, I would say just go check them all out. Those albums being the first one, Maps of Non-Existent Places, the second one, Stranger Heads Prevail, which is my personal favorite, and the third one, Terraformer. Like I said, their second album, Stranger Heads Prevail, is probably their best. It's absolutely incredible from start to finish, but their first and the third are also really good. You really can't go wrong with any of them. If you want to start off by listening to individual songs from Thank You Scientist, I would highly recommend Mr. Invisible and A Wolf in Cheap Clothing, both from Stranger Heads Prevail. Those are probably my 2 favorite songs Thank You Scientists have ever done. Another really good song from their first album is Feed the Horses, which has a slightly heavier tone than a lot of their other songs. It's not the heaviest song you'll ever hear in your life, but there's something a bit more ominous, a bit more bite to that song. So if you're more into metal, that might be a good place to start. And another really good song is Caverns, which probably has one of their best guitar solos on any of the songs they've done. And being a guitar player, I'm a little biased to songs with good guitar solos. But whatever album or song you start off with, I just cannot recommend going to check out Thank You Scientist enough. They are such a unique and incredibly talented band that should be getting more attention. They are just starting out in their career, so I hope to see them grow and become bigger. That'd be really cool. And if you haven't heard about them, please do yourself a favor and go check them out. Okay, now we get to the second artist in this episode, Brazilian power metal prog band Angra. Angra was formed in 1991 and for decades has been putting out top tier quality power metal. If you're a fan of Dystopia, or at least the guitar work on that album, and you think the solos are absolutely insane, which they are, the crazy thing about Kiko Loureiro as a guitarist is that when he left Angra and joined Megadeth, he actually toned back his craziness a bit. When you listen to his work with Megadeth and his work that he did for years with Angra, Angra is a lot more progressive. It infuses a lot more different styles in there. And in terms of technique, there's some stuff that he does with Angra that is up there with any single shred guitar player you have ever heard. So with that in mind, if you haven't checked out Angra, you're really missing out. I feel completely confident in saying that their albums Rebirth and Temple of Shadows are 2 of the greatest heavy metal albums ever put out by any band. I know that's a bold statement, but I really do think it's true. Those 2 albums can go toe-to-toe with anything else anyone's put out. If you enjoy bands like Helloween and Stratovarius, but you just wish that they incorporated more progressive elements, or maybe that they included some world music in their sound, then I think you'll really like Angra. And like I said before, this band has been around for decades, so they have a couple different eras to their music with a couple different singers, a couple different lineup changes, so getting into their music can be a bit daunting at first. Their earlier albums are a bit more straightforward power metal, a bit less progressive, they have a bit less influence from Brazilian music in those songs. And their debut album, Angel's Cry, has a song that is probably their quintessential power metal anthem, being Carry On. The title track, Angel's Cry, is also another really great place to start if you're just a straightforward power metal fan and you don't really care too much for progressiveness. Another really big fan favorite and standout song from their early years is Nothing to Say. Those songs are a really good introduction to that era of the band, the early years before they got a bit more progressive. So like I said, if you just want straightforward power metal, start with those songs. The singer for this time in the band was Andre Matos, and he was an absolutely incredible singer. Sadly left the band in the late 90s, although he did have success with solo projects, and unfortunately he died a couple years ago, so rest in peace to him. After Andre Matos left the band in the late 90s, he was replaced, and the band released Rebirth, which is probably my second favorite album by them. If you still like more straightforward power metal, it's a good place to start, although it does incorporate a lot more progressive elements than their previous albums had. Rebirth was released in 2001. 5 years later, in 2006, the band followed it up with what I think is their masterpiece and by far their greatest album, Temple of Shadows. Like I said before, I consider Rebirth and Temple of Shadows to be two of the best metal albums put out by any band, and if you're trying to get into Angra, I would suggest just start with these two albums. But with that being said, if you're not really well versed in prog rock or progressive metal, start with Rebirth and then maybe work your way into Temple of Shadows. For a music nerd like me, Temple of Shadows is the gold standard. It's absolutely incredible, but I do recognize it might not be as accessible for people who are not super in the weeds with this kind of music like I am. So if you never listened to Angra, but all my rambling has made you curious to go listen to them, that's where I would suggest starting. Okay, and so for this episode, the final artist I'm going to talk about is folk rock singer-songwriter Beth Patterson. Beth Patterson seems to have been active in music since at least 1999, where, as far as I can tell, her first album was released. And she came to my attention a few years ago when I came across her cover of Wasted Years here on YouTube. I was instantly blown away by her voice. It's absolutely beautiful, and so I went and checked out a lot of her work. And if you like folk music and world music that has a touch of rock to it, you'll probably really like her work. What I really like about Beth Patterson's music is the wide array of influences you can hear on pretty much every song. Also, her voice has a really crisp quality to it, and it sounds as though she's singing effortlessly, even when what she's singing is pretty difficult stuff. Another great thing about her music is the amount of different instruments you'll hear on each song. Yes, of course there's bass, guitar, and drums, but you'll also hear bouzouki or strings or some other instrument you're not expecting sometimes. And having that diversity on each song keeps you entertained, keeps you on your toes. It makes each song sound unique and gives you something new to listen for each time. So if you want to get into Beth Patterson and you're coming from a rock and metal background, which I assume most of you probably are coming from, I would say check out her covers of Wasted Years and Red Lenses. Those are probably good places to start. If you like those two songs and you want to hear more, then check out her back catalog. There's a lot of really great songs. My personal favorite song by her is Exodus, the first song on her first album. It just has a really great harmonic minor riff that's going on. It has a Egyptian-esque sound, being that it's about the book of Exodus. Spin is another really great song from her first album, which is more rock-oriented. It's a good place to start out, once again, if you're new to this kind of folk music. I think that song might be a bit more accessible at easing yourself into this style of music. Like all of the artists on this list, she has a ton of great material, so the more you look into her music, I'm sure the more hidden gems you'll find. And that's it for this episode of Artists That Deserve More Love. Hopefully you'll find a new favorite song from one of these bands. And if you like this video and think that this channel deserves more love, feel free to comment, like, subscribe, all of that YouTube stuff. I know it's a cliche to ask, but it really does help the channel grow, and it is greatly appreciated, so thank you in advance for that. And before we end, I just want to ask if you've heard any of these bands before, if you like them, have you gone and checked them out? What do you think of them? Let me know in the comments below. And let us know what artists you think deserve more love. What bands are underrated in your opinion? Like always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you at the next video.